lots of the kinds of activities we do. We are an organization, a nonprofit that does environmental education, and we focus on youth and the community. So our youth education, we bring classrooms here from all over North Central Washington to do a full day of hands-on environmental education. And we have a traveling naturalist program where we travel as far away as Brewster, Manson, Chelan, Orondo, Rock Island, and we take environmental education into the classroom. And we target schools that particularly serve a high percentage of low income and students of color. And we have grant funding that helps us bring our programs to those schools because they often don't have the resources to bring their students to us. And then as part of our traveling naturalist program, we go into their classroom once a month with an environmental education lesson. And then each of those classrooms gets an opportunity to do a full day field trip. And we either take them to a natural area near their school, or we bring them here to the Wenatchee River Institute campus. We also do community education. This is one of our, what we consider our Red Barn events. We also have workshops. We have multi-day field trips. We did a hawk watch where out of Chelan, went up and watched hawks going through. We have a tracking class coming up that's a weekend, couple of day class. We have wreath making class. We have all sorts of adult education opportunities. And last year, most of our adult opportunities would fill up almost immediately. So if any of those things sound of interest to you, many of our workshops have limited enrollment because we want our participants to have the best experience possible. So we keep our enrollment small so that you have a good experience. But if any of those sound appealing to you, you really ought to get on our website and sign up for our e-newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks, because that's where we announce our upcoming workshops and classes. And a great example, and I'm going to have to call on Chelsea and Joshua, who are the two community educators for the Wenatchee River Institute, to help me not lie on this, is that we did have a mushroom hunting workshop a couple of weekends ago. And it was a collaborative event with the Puget Sound Mycological Society. And we held 30 spots for Wenatchee River Institute folks. And then the West Side folks could bring over as many as they wanted. And those 30 spots filled up like super fast. And how super fast did they fill up? Yeah, it was fast. Yeah. So it is worth it to get into the e-news so that you know what's going on. I also want to tell you, we live stream our Red Barn events. So I am mic'd and we've got Joshua who's manning sort of our live streaming. So we do have folks online who may be asking questions as well. So we are trying to sort of create equal access to some of our opportunities, knowing that not everybody can come to our events here. So a bit more about the Wenatchee River Institute. We own 2 buildings, this building and the River House, which is kitty corner to us, and 9.5 acres of cultivated, landscaped and natural areas. Our property goes almost all the way down to the Wenatchee River. And then we manage another building and another 3.5 acres. So in total, we have 3 buildings. This one, a building that was built in 1908 and a building that was built in about 1915. So we have 2 olds and a new, and a lot of property. This is a perfect environment for teaching children because it's a classroom outdoors. So we have boots, kids go down to the river and scoop out macroinvertebrates out of the river. They can bird watch, they can hunt for bugs. This is a perfect teaching environment about nature. So on that note, I thank you for coming, and I want to introduce our speakers tonight. And I have, well, no, I don't. I have coaches here on the side who should be helping me because I'm a little slow. I'm going to actually start with our land acknowledgement. And we're proud of our land acknowledgement. We worked with the Piscosa tribe on creating this land acknowledgement so it would reflect what they wanted said. It took a year to create this land acknowledgement, so it was a long process, but a process that both parties feel good about. So this land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shimpisquawshu people. We are spreading the message they wish to be spread to the public. The land Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shimpisquawshu, Piscosa, or Wenatchee people. The Shimpisquawshu, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and surrounding areas. Their ancestral homelands extends from the Cascade Range throughout what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of the Shimpisquawshu people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. The Shimpisquawshu are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shimpisquawshu now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their land here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shimpisquawshu people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they are connected to. Their traditional language is in Hamchi, an interior Salish dialect. We offer this land acknowledgement as a first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about Indigenous peoples of the place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. And just as a side note, 2 days ago, we actually temporarily installed a new art piece that is down near the river, and it was created by a Piscosa artist. And it's about a 4-foot tall salmon sculpture made out of all recycled metal. It's a really beautiful art piece. It will eventually get installed on a granite base, but it's down there temporarily. So I encourage you to kind of take a wander down there the next time you're here, because we're pleased to be able to not only commission a Piscosa artist, but also to recognize the value of salmon to those people. And I do also need to recognize our sponsors. The reason we can do Red Barn events is because we have businesses that sponsor us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the lights and the people to be able to put on these events. So we have a wide variety of businesses, local and kind of North Central Washington, who support us. Gustav's Grill and Beer Garden, Ludwig's German Restaurant, Obertal Inn, Posey Handpicked Goods, South Restaurants, Hotel Pension Anna, Munchen House, Sleeping Lady Mountain Resort, North Central Washington Audubon Society, Icicle Brewing, the Cove Resort at Fish Lake, Kolchak's Consignment, Riverfront Rock Gym, and the Mountain Home Lodge. So if you go to any of those businesses, be sure to thank them for sponsoring Red Barn events, because your recognition of their sponsorship helps them want to sponsor us in future years. So now on that note, I will introduce our speakers tonight. So I'm delighted to have Tom and Gina McCoy, and they are co-founders of a nonprofit called C6 Forest to Farm. And Tom is the executive director of the nonprofit, and Gina is the board chair. And C6 was incorporated, has been in existence about 2.5 years. Tom and Gina both have backgrounds in natural resource management and also landscape ecology. They both have spent the majority of their careers working on the eastern slope of the Cascades. And Gina's work background is with WDFW, specializing in stream processes, and much of her career has been spent in the Wenatchee watershed. And Tom's background is as a plant ecologist and land manager with WDFW and also with the Yakima Nation. And a fun fact about the two of them is they told me that they fell in love over a grant application. And I write a lot of grants and I've not ever fallen in love over a grant application. But the other fun fact is that grant application was ranked #1 of the over 400 applications that were submitted. So not only did they fall in love, they got money. So on that note, I will turn this over and I need to pass along a microphone to Tom. You've got one.
We are hardcore nerds, I guess.
Pretty much. So, okay, so I stand there and it will do my bidding. Okay. All right. Hi, folks. It is great to be here tonight. Tom and I founded C6 Forest to Farm with the goal, with the mission of protecting our forests, our communities, and our climate from the risks of extreme wildfire. So that is at the core of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so let me see. Did I just turn that off? What did I do? So natural resources, not technology, is kind of my thing. Yeah, we live in the Methow. We've been there 14 years. And in the last 8 years, more than half the watershed is burned. And we finally decided that was not being addressed. Okay, I pushed that. Oh. So, that's on you, Tom. Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, I'm going to start out with the bad news, which is that extreme fire is a growing threat, and I'm sure you are all acutely aware of that. From year to year, the fire behavior is getting more extreme, the fires are getting bigger, and I think everybody's understanding that this is being driven by climate change. But the other part of the equation is that fires are now becoming drivers of the climate change, and that's kind of a scary proposition. This is the Carlton Complex fire in 2014, but which at the time became the record wildfire recorded in Washington state, but that record was broken the next year. So anyway, this is just kind of an example of what wildfire emissions can look like. This is from last year. We had 2 fires in the Methow that collectively burned about 126,000 acres, which was 10% of the watershed, and killed about 50,000 acres of forest. So this is just the immediate emissions, and it doesn't account for the fact that those 50,000 acres of dead trees will be emitting carbon for years to come instead of absorbing carbon. So just want to kind of put that in context. The fires emitted more than 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide, and human emissions, it's a small population, but it was about 50,000 tons. Now, the problem isn't just climate, it's that the condition of the forests is drastically different than what they historically were. We're on the east slope of the Cascades. These are dry forests here. They're not supposed to be closed canopy like west side wet forests. And so I think people are pretty familiar with the idea that fire suppression has allowed a lot of encroachment of small trees, where in areas where the tree density used to be 14 to 40 trees per acre, mature trees spaced, now it can be hundreds or even up to 1,000 trees per acre. So yeah, we kind of understand that. So these are creating the fuels that develop these extreme fires that are killing forests that are ecologically adapted to low intensity, frequent ground fires. But the other part here that you can't see, the reason those trees are there is not just fire suppression and other management. It's that those trees have negative economic value. The Forest Service land management agencies are not funded to go out and do forest health restoration. And these trees, it costs a lot of money to take them away and do anything with them. A big part of that problem is because the infrastructure is massive and widely scattered. So the transportation costs of moving these materials, you have to have a pretty decent size piece of wood, a saw log, to drive it, to haul it 150 miles or more to a mill, or the materials going to pulp mills or cogen facilities. It's, we're 150 miles from the nearest sawmill in our valley. You're probably similar. So the cost of doing anything about those trees has been a big impediment because of the distance to facilities. So our concept we came up with is we need local community scale facilities that will make use of these materials and at least pay for the cost of getting them out of the forest that they're threatening. And we've studied the range of options of what you can do with this stuff. And what we came to was biochar production is really well suited for local community scale type facilities. The other options tend to be much bigger scale of infrastructure. So we're talking about facilities that would serve like a 35 to 50 mile radius instead of 150 miles. So this is what I get to talk about. And then I'm going to turn the conversation over to Tom to talk about our plans for establishing pilot biochar facilities. So what is biochar? Well, in the most simple terms, it's charcoal made from biomass. That's probably not useful to you. It's very carbon rich. Good quality biochar is upwards of 80% carbon. And that's in a very stable form that's not really subject to decomposition like fresh biomass is, which gives it some pretty amazing properties. It's actually a class of substances because depending on the feedstock, you're originating biomass and the conditions that you process it in, you can get an extremely wide range of chemical and physical properties that you can do a lot of different things with. How it's made is through a process called pyrolysis. And if you remember grade school or middle school or something where you heard the three components of combustion, you've got fuel, you've got heat, and you need oxygen. So pyrolysis is just the first two of those. It's the fuel, it's the heat as if you were burning it. But in the absence of oxygen, it doesn't flame. What happens is that all the volatile substances in the biomass are evaporated out of there. And those would normally create flames. It's a vapor stream. There's other things that happen to that. But what's left behind after you evaporate those out is kind of the skeletal structure, cellular structure of the biomass. So And that the carbon bonds have actually been altered to make them stronger than in fresh biomass. And now I get to talk about why biochar is so important. So first, climate. Jim Amenet and his co-authors are world-leading experts in biochar. And their estimate from the paper from last year is that a third of the carbon that needs to come out of the atmosphere to stabilize the climate in the next 100 years could be stored in sustainably produced biochar. That's a huge number, a third. And if anybody has another trick that can do that, that doesn't involve creating new technologies, I want to hear about it, because we've got all the technology we need for creating cleanly and efficiently creating biochar. So this is super exciting. But I get to geek out a little bit now and talk about carbon, because you have to, that's central to why biochar is so important. So carbon's our sixth element. Each atom has 6 electrons, 6 protons. It's by far the most versatile element of them all, which is the reason it's the basis of all life on Earth. So whether we are microbes, humans, or giant sequoias, if you take away the water out of us, we're all about 50% carbon. So that's pretty cool. And it's really remarkable, because this planet doesn't really have that much carbon. It's the 17th most abundant element. And the Earth's crust, where all of it originally came from, is only about 0.02% carbon. The atmosphere, which is where the carbon for our ecosystems is coming from, is only about 1/100%, but we are 50%, which is 4,400 times more concentrated than the atmosphere. So I think it's really cool that life is such an amazing concentrator of carbon. And this is how it happens. This is the terrestrial carbon cycle, which just shows the flow of carbon in and out of the atmosphere and into and out of our ecosystems. And so carbon is withdrawn from the atmosphere through the miracle of photosynthesis. But okay, so let's look at a couple things here. The yellow numbers represent the amount of carbon moving on an annual basis. The white arrows show the flow, and these are gigatons. And the white numbers show the amount of carbon in these different pools. So the atmosphere, oh, darn it. Oh, there. The atmosphere has about 800 gigatons. Plant biomass has about 550. But look at this, 2,300 gigatons in the soil. And we don't even think about carbon being in the soil. So more about soil carbon, but photosynthesis, finding that little bit of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere up there and pumping water up from the ground to the canopy and putting them together and powered by solar energy is how all biomass is made. This is the foundation of life on the planet. And at the same time, oxygen is released. So we like that too. So anyway, the one thing I'm hoping you'll take away tonight is this. Photosynthesis is removing about 9 times more carbon out of the atmosphere than humans are emitting. Now, no, 13 times, excuse me. Now, absolutely, we have to reduce our emissions to as close to zero as possible. But at least as important is protecting our ecosystems that are doing this work. If we don't protect those ecosystems, we are not going to stabilize the climate. So that we can do more than one thing. Ecosystem protection is right up there with emission reduction. So we've got to love them, we've got to protect them. And if we let them collapse and we don't help them transition in the face of the changing climate, we're not going to win this. So that's my gospel is ecosystem protection. Okay, make sure I got the right arrow here. Moving on to soil carbon. It's the difference between soil and dirt. That's what defines topsoil, is the presence of that carbon in there, organic matter. And you can't have too much of it in the soil. It's all good there. Carbon is just the center of soil health and fertility. But this is what's been happening with our agricultural practices. We're losing carbon out of our agricultural soil. So we're losing health and productivity. And that's just not a good deal. And we're not losing the carbon. We know where it is. It's not lost, it's in the atmosphere. And about 20%, I've estimated, or I've seen estimates that about 20% of the excess carbon in the atmosphere has come from our soils. So, all right, I'm almost done here. Here's another, so this is color-coded map of the concentrations of above ground woody biomass across the continental US. And above ground woody biomass is our main problem when it comes to fires, right? You can see from that other map that the West Coast has some of the highest concentrations. And here we are living in a sea of carbon, or as Paul Hesburgh puts it, we have an epidemic of trees. So the bottom line is we've got too much carbon in some places, like in these overstocked forests. We've got too much carbon in the atmosphere. And we've got too little carbon in our agricultural soils, generally speaking. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to Tom, because we believe that biochar is the ideal vehicle for rebalancing those systems and putting carbon from where it's a threat to where it's a huge benefit. So that's the regular carbon cycling in and out of the atmosphere and the ecosystems. This is the biochar cycle, where we aim to take those forest materials that are threatening the health of the forest and convert them into biochar in carbon storage. And then that's about 50% of the carbon embodied in those materials. And the other 50% has other valuable uses. So that's, I'm going to hand this off to Tom now.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to have to use my cheat sheet because this is my 6th presentation in 10 days, and they're all a jumble.
And I'm here to finish his sentences.
Yeah, when I screw it up. Exactly.
We've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
We've been one brain for 25
So which way do
years.
we go, up here and down? And
This is go forward and that's go back.
okay,
And there's your pointer.
let's go forward.
Forward.
So protecting our forests, climate, and communities. It's oftentimes thought, a lot of people are skeptical of forest health treatments in general. I guess there's a lot of people that are still leery of the spotted owl wars from the 80s and the 90s, kind of scared of it. The take home, my take home message, one of them is that our forests out here, they're going to be thinned whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of whose prescription we use. Okay. We can use, we can prescribe to do it like that. This is how nature does it. So how are we proposing to do this? Here's a good example of an overstocked forest that's actually on the Methow wildlife area. And every tree that I'm not touching essentially needs to go away. Okay. And I was going to bring my prop and I left it. Unfortunately, I cut a cookie out of one of those trees in that stand there. And it's about that big around and it's 102 years old. So those are 100-year-old trees in the background. The one I'm touching is about 175. It just grew in a different environment before everything was overstocked. The trouble, like Gina said, is that material has never really had any economic value. And that's what we're trying to change with biochar. So we believe we can generate sufficient economic value from biochar and the co-products of pyrolysis, which we'll touch on a little bit, to pay for the cost of the removal of those materials. So here's what that looks like. This is off the Mission Project. This is an active sale happening right now up in the Methow Valley. That unit was harvested in September, late August. And the Forest Service, or actually in this case, Hampton Lumber was the purchaser of that sale, has invested all of that energy into accumulating that material, taking it from the forest and aggregating it in one spot. But this is what we do with it. That's how forest management's happened. And it's shocking. Yeah. So it's, we have to do better. And we believe that we have the ability, the technology, and hopefully the will to do better than that. So we got an estimate from one of the Forest Service regional biometricians a couple of weeks ago, looking at how much of this kind of biomass will be generated on upcoming projects here in the Wenatchee Valley, the Chumstick LP, and 2 of the associated fuels treatments. And it was something on the order of 600,000 tons. That's not the saw logs, it's that. And that's going to be the fate of it unless we do something. Uh-oh. Okay. So we'll get to the origin of the polygons here coming up. But this well, I'll just tell you right now, that's the Forest Service came up with a document in January outlining how they're going to spend the infrastructure money that was allocated to them to promote to do forest health projects. They prioritized everything and knew that there's not enough money on the planet to do everything at once. And so they broke everything down into priority fire sheds, they're calling them, that are about watershed size plus or minus. And then within the regions, we are in Oregon and Washington constitute Region 6 for the Forest Service. And within Region 6, there's the highest priority fire sheds. Number 4 is the part of the Methow Valley. We are in, or right on the boundary of 1 and 2 right now. So that is here. We are proposing to build a pilot scale biochar production facility about where that blue diamond is. So the plans for the plant, and I've got some of these diagrams out in the back on paper format if anybody'd like to look. So we were fortunate enough to kind of poach a senior program manager from the finance department at Expedia to be our director of finance. I mean, the guy's a beast. And so Mark joined us shortly after that. We hired an engineer who was the lead mechanical and systems engineer for a big international engineering firm. He is also a beast. And together they're unholy. So long story short, we have come to our analysis indicates that the smallest economically self-sustaining facility we can build will consume about 12,000 green tons of biomass per year, which sounds like a lot. It isn't. It's a blip. Think few hundred acres of treatments, something like that. It's not that much. It would operate, pyrolyze a 1 bone dry ton per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in about 30-day runs. Then you have to shut it down for maintenance. It's a thermal process. So when you get it hot, you want to leave it hot because it takes a lot of energy to heat the system. And once it's going, you just let it roll. Produces about 25 to 2,700 tons of biochar per year. We are thrilled to say that we already have a signed letter of intent. It's non-binding, but we have a signed letter of intent to purchase the entirety of our biochar production at this scale. That, when we were going into this, we thought that was going to be the hard part. And as it turns out, that was actually pretty easy, and it's getting easier. And then energy, it's really easy to generate a fair amount of energy from a process like this. The problem is wholesale power here is 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. It's almost free. It's the cheapest energy in the country. And when you talk to them about putting a megawatt on the grid, they're like, don't bother us until you get the double digits or more. So we are looking at what to do with the other co-products. The two other things that come off in the vapor stream is a gas. It's a few gases actually, but they're combustible. You can generate heat and electricity with them, possibly renewable natural gas. And then there's a condensable stream that you can leave it in the vapor stream and burn it for energy, or you can condense it out. And there's some really interesting things you can do with that. And I'm not going to go into it, Gina's, because I get really nerdy on that. It's super cool. The condensables, there are about 200 organic compounds in that. We don't know what all of them are either. Some of them are kind of worthless. Some are fabulously valuable. But this also creates a lot of good paying jobs. Our base rate, the lowest rate at the plant we're penciling in is $25 an hour plus benefits. And then it goes up from there. You can see the site we're looking at is at Winton Manufacturing. I'm sure most of you know where that is, up by Cole's Corner at the old Longview Fiber Mill. There is here's some conceptual layouts for reactor systems and the processing equipment. We're evaluating options on which space we use and how each of those scales, that sort of thing. And we're closing in on reaching a lease agreement with them. So biochar production has been around for a very, very long time. It used to be done like that, or other similarly crude methods. This is a facility that was over in Chehalis, and that right there processes about 37,000 tons a year. So the next slide, and I want to show everybody what the emissions from that look like in operation. Clean, super clean. In fact, when we were running our research reactor, the Department of Ecology gave us a 5% opacity limit, which basically means if you could see smoke, we were out of compliance. And it's kind of the reason it was hard to do with the little machine there. It wasn't as big. The high-end equipment, super clean. And the only thing that's really you're seeing coming out of there is water vapor. There's a bunch of it in there. Okay, we've already seen that. The other interesting part of the revenue stream we're working on is carbon credits. So we've had multiple conversations with carbon providers in the carbon marketplace, the international carbon marketplace. And let's just say they're extremely enthusiastic about what we're proposing to do here. And it's not just that we're producing biochar, which is considered the gold standard of carbon credits. It's tangible. You can measure how much carbon's in it, how much mass you've got, where it goes. You can provide a GPS shot where it went in the soil. Very few things are like that. And that's why the big corporates are really interested in that, because you kind of can't greenwash it. The other thing that really has gotten these folks excited is story, because there is kind of a ballpark market price for carbon offsets, but you negotiate them. The better your story is, the more money you get. So that we're very enthusiastic about this. And this is where I need to step into my notes here. No, I don't need to hook up to Wi-Fi. Okay. So putting biochar in soil, we can engineer biochars to have a whole bunch of physical and chemical properties. But what it really gets exciting is when you put it in the soil and the biology starts to interact with it. And this is something that, frankly, I'm not being a soil microbiologist, even though I sometimes play one on TV. It's the soil biota start interacting with these particles and doing things like excreting carbohydrate coatings around it. And that changes the external chemistry. So not only does it capture like cations, positively charged ions, but it forms anion capturing capability. So when you're, say, a farmer and you have that in there and you apply a fertilizer, it starts binding to the fertilizers rather than those fertilizers washing through your soil or volatilizing back into the atmosphere. It acts like a sponge, and it does the same for water. And so there's been some pretty fantastic results from research that's happening. And speaking of the research, it is growing literally at an exponential rate globally right now. I just threw that in there as an example. That's a meta-analysis of meta-analyses. The mother of all meta-analyses, looking at all of the things that biochar does in soil, and it's basically all good. All the good things on the right, and then on the bottom, capturing things like heavy metals, binding those in soil so they're no longer bioavailable. And then you can see some simple growth studies on the left. And this one a little closer to home. This is from the Oregon State University Agricultural Research Station out of Pendleton. Stephen Machado did some work with dryland wheat with biochar applications. And the yield increases, those are bushels on the left, and the left axis. Those increases in yields are the difference between surviving and thriving as a farmer or perishing. I mean, that is a low margin sport, and any benefits you can get from that are huge. The problem with a crop like dryland wheat, low yield, low profit. Fortunately, the federal government is really starting to recognize the value of biochar for agriculture and is moving in with a whole bunch of financial help. So on the left, the Natural Resources Conservation Service is coming up with a new cost-sharing practice for adding biochar to soil. It's not, they've had an interim practice for the last 3 years. The price they were offering there would cover 100%. We could easily put biochar into soils and cover it with that cost. We don't know what the final is going to be like. We're hoping it combination. It's own drop the Biochar Research Network Act of 2022 on the Senate. There is a House version as well. And what that's doing is providing hundreds of millions of dollars to build a nationwide research network to really answer all the questions about biochar and soil, because it's damned complicated. And we don't know that much now. So they're proposing to just put the money in and get it done, which is really encouraging. And then in the grant space, just in the last few years, biochar is everywhere. And these are huge grants. Like the Climate Smart Commodities minimum ask was $5 million up to $100 million. And there's more of these projects coming out. So there's huge momentum being generated by the federal government right now. And same in the corporate side, some of the fund managers we've talked to for private property fire-wise treatments. There's some other nuances there with the sort yard that would also help that. Would make a big difference for private landowners getting that work done. And then they wouldn't have to burn the slash piles themselves, because right now that's essentially the requirement. And talking to the DNR guys, over 80% of their wildfire starts are from slash pile burning on private land. So that's a good thing to not do that. Air quality. That's a picture from our driveway during the balloon rally. Great. That's a picture from, God, last year, just kind of a random snapshot. Our house is right by the 681. And I had to chuckle. I did a presentation yesterday in Seattle, and that was kind of the buzz over there. Everybody's talking, oh, the air quality, blah, blah, blah. And I pulled up Purple Air and they were about 200, 250. And was like, God, you sissies, double it, triple it, then come tell me how, your soccer practice got canceled. So this, while we may not prevent every wildfire, less fuel in the forest means less smoke. That's just simple. But also this time of year, for the next month or so, mountains of slash piles not being burned, hundreds of thousands of tons happening. And so it really, this represents, a paradigm shift for forest managers. And it's hard to communicate that, or for people, a lot of people in the forest industry to acknowledge that, to really understand what this means, but it's coming. I was on a panel at the Bioenergy Summit yesterday in Seattle with a guy named Thor Kalstad. He's the CEO of MinoCorp. They have reached an agreement with the Vista Energy, who is a big they have a 50 megawatt cogen facility in Kettle Falls. I don't know if you've seen it as you cross the river going through Kettle Falls. It's right there on the right adjacent to the Boise Cascade Mill, where they are moving, they're building a gasifier facility there, pyrolysis, that will consume 350,000 tons per year. And that's the kind of thing we need. We need all of that to happen. So we can start, instead of, taking the big slash piles and putting them back into the atmosphere, let's make productive use of every molecule, because we have the ability to do that now. So getting back to this document, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this is the fire sheds, the priority fire sheds that I alluded to earlier. We're the ones up there on the left. Here's that, here's that. There's where we're proposing. That's Winton. That's what that is. So in the grand scheme of things, a 10,000 ton per year, 12,000 ton per year plant doesn't really mean much. But when we run the model, get all the details lined out, we'll work on scaling it then. We've played around with drawings for 10 times that scale at that facility. Still, there's a whole lot of space not covered. So the next step, scaling it to the regional level, each one of those scaled to the community and the labor force available, what the community will accept, the biomass availability, and all of them integrated, sharing the same back office resources, sales channels, transportation, logistics, and infrastructure. But then at that scale, we can produce volumes of material that open up new market opportunities like biofuels. We've had 2 conversations with ExxonMobil, and the bottom line is, if we can hit 30 megajoules per kilogram in the liquids, they'll buy all we can make if we can make 2,000 barrels a day, 365 days a year, which I did a quick off-the-cuff calculation. Our pilot plant we're proposing, 31.6 of those to hit the bare minimum like that. So if you can start playing at scale, there's whole new possibilities that open up. And then once we have the regional model, we put that together. That's the next step. And that's the and I think I'm pretty close to time. Not bad.
Not bad.
That's, for me, that's really good. Yeah.
So we do want to have questions, and because we have online people, I think, we have online people? No questions. And I think I need to borrow a microphone, the microphone around there.
Okay, I will donate mine.
And then maybe you two can share the microphone. So how this works, because we have people online, is if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, I will run over to you with the microphone so you can say your question into the microphone so the online people can hear. Okay? So any questions for our presenters? Yes.
Terrific presentation. That was wonderful. Quick question. What powers your reactor that is doing this process? Is it electric? Is there a chance to capture the gas coming off of that and fire it back up and make it perpetual?
Yes.
So the process pyrolysis emits heat once it's going. So it's a matter of getting it to that temperature. But I mean, the plant will take electricity for running, running conveyor belts and things like that.
But getting things up to temperature, depending on the system you use, some of them are purely electrically heated. Other ones recirculate some of the synthesis gas, the syngas, to generate that heat. So we're looking at both processes right now. One way or the other, we could generate enough electricity to more than run the whole facility, except maybe a grinder, which those are thirsty.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a net producer of energy.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference in prescriptions of applying biochar versus like a mastication prescription, like on forest
Mm.
ecology?
Interesting. So mastication is obviously going to leave all of that material on site. That there's pluses and minuses depending on the circumstance and how much there is. So some of those stands we looked at, 1,000 tons or 1,000 trees per acre. If you masticate it, it'd probably be a foot deep and you'd have nothing growing there. You would, you'd have no access to bare mineral soil. You'd tie up your nitrogen and do some other things. Mastication is actually a pretty good thing if the soils need that material.
That's the thing is, it'll be up to the soil scientists to make sure that enough nutrients stay on site.
Yes.
That's, this is all about forest health. And we've got no interest in depleting the forest of nutrients. On the other hand, where there's all that excess stuff, all of it is destined to go back into the atmosphere. This, pyrolyzing that, making biochar, putting it in the ground is a way of taking that carbon off the table and out of the active carbon cycle. So it's, yeah. But as far as, we're not going to rob the forests of, their nutrients they need for.
Yeah.
And there's experts to make, to make sure that doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
The mastication is a tool that is being used more frequently all the time. It's expensive and carbon intensive and slow, but there's a lot of good reasons to do it.
But I mean, just the duff accumulation, the litter on the forest floor, because we haven't had fires, it's that by itself is enough to kill those big old trees by heating the ground. Where there used to be fires every 7 to 15 or 20 years and just taking that stuff off a little at a time. Now it's all sitting there still.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem.
They've had real problems losing old growth trees that didn't burn into the canopy.
Yeah.
But their roots are growing into that duff layer. When that burns, it's
Mhm.
burning the roots and killing the trees.
Yeah.
That's a significant concern.
What is your timeline? And I'm curious, as a community member, how can we help to support and participate in your incredible project that you have going on?
Timeline. So thanks to some very significant and generous support from Chelan County and one of our county commissioners sitting right back there in particular. We are hoping to be essentially shovel ready this spring. Maybe early summer, but we're really shooting for spring, and we are, right now actively seeking construction funding. So I'll spare you the details. We're in an interesting kind of no man's land funding wise for construction costs. It's easy to get money if you need 50 million or more. The big investors want to deploy large volumes. They don't want to be the first one in the door for a small facility until we, have answered all the questions. And then we'll be off and running.
Maybe the second one in the door, but
Yeah.
not the first one. Yeah.
You want to answer the community support participation?
So, we really don't expect to be able to raise the $6 or $7 million from the community directly. We could certainly, we are looking at grant opportunities and other things. That's the steep hill to climb right now. What we need is community support and understanding for how important this is. And
Yeah.
I didn't come here ready to answer this.
Yeah. But also, community outreach. So
Community outreach,
yeah,
yes.
we have a we partnered with an engineering firm from the west side on a U.S. Department of Energy grant for building the pre-processing equipment, how to scale that to different sizes at community scale. Part of the grant is defining what is community scale. And so we are, you know, people's visions of that are very different. And so we actually have a pretty extensive list of people to go out and communicate with. And the more we can get help communicating with the community abroad, we're new here. You know, we know everybody up north, but not as many people down here. So all of that helps.
Actually, what I need to do is collect anybody that's interested in being on my contact list. I need to get your information because I send out, you know, periodic updates on how we're going. And I really need to get that started here, get as many people on so I can stay in touch. And then as we get some momentum going up here, sort of try to create a group in this area. So this is our first foray, you know, to come start talking to the community. And we got a long ways to go. We're small but mighty, but small is the operative word. And we're going 1,000 miles an hour just about every day. We just need more capacity than we've got right now. So I'm the unpaid staff. So anyway, but I'd love to keep you informed. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, $7 million isn't that much. I mean, what they spent $4.4 billion on fire suppression last year.
67 million in the Met Cal.
Yeah. And you know, that doesn't count the billions and billions of dollars of damage done by fires. You know, there's got to be it's not that much money. So if you got great ideas on where we can find some, then we'd love to hear them. And does anybody want to know why we're a nonprofit? Because, yeah, right. Well, the bottom line is that things are becoming far more favorable towards biochar than when we started this 2.5, 3 years ago. We had to start every conversation saying what it was. There were no carbon credits for it. It wasn't because it wasn't understood that this is a tremendous carbon storage opportunity. It was because they couldn't agree on how to quantify that. But the UN panel on climate change called it out a couple years ago. It's in the infrastructure bill now. President Biden has spoken of it. It's getting into federal legislation. Things have changed tremendously. That said, our aim is to save the forests. It's not specifically to make biochar. And taking that material out is going to be a relatively expensive type of feedstock. There'll be much cheaper feedstock available for commercial purposes. But those will not, or going over on the west side, that will not save our fire-prone, you know, forests. So that is our mission. And we don't see a for-profit entity coming in to do that, to take that on. So I just wanted to say that because Tom was going on about all these great things with, you know, biochar money, but we're on the cusp, we're on a wave. But it's not, nobody is out there doing that right now.
Yeah.
And when they do jump in, it's going to be gigantic things. We need those community scale things to get this forest material.
Fit in all the gaps that aren't going to be hit by the giant mega facilities.
And we do have a question online.
You may have already answered this first one. How are you currently working with local and adjacent landowners? Have they been brought on board so they can voice their concerns?
Okay, we are just beginning that process. I'm speaking to this.
Mm-hmm.
So being new here, we're just initiating that process, and we'll be through various means doing that, reaching out to individuals, working with the the county natural resources department, and the whole permitting process. We've already talked to some of the neighbors adjacent to Winton. So we're very much interested in hearing the thoughts from the community and their concerns.
We'll be doing a lot of community outreach.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a start. Explaining that this is, just that this is a clean and efficient process. It's, explaining all the benefits, and what you heard on that little video clip, that's what it sounds like next to the plant. This is not a dirty, nasty, grinding the materials will be the loudest part, but we can mitigate for that. So getting out and doing outreach and basically letting people know what this is what to expect, what it's going to look like. But the plant set you have in mind is, there's really not, it's not in a neighborhood where there's going to be, affecting somebody living next door.
And the second question is on carbon credits. Why wouldn't the Forest Service be interested in it versus outside companies outside of the community?
The Forest Service, I don't think, is eligible for carbon credits. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I don't believe they are eligible to receive those. And they're not the ones that would actually be doing the sequestering. So they would make the material available, hopefully, because frankly, that's been our biggest challenge, is getting the material from the Forest Service, getting them to say, yes, we will make 12,000 tons. We're going to generate 100,000 tons a year, but making 12,000 available to you is going to. Gina's tired of me hearing me talk about it.
Well, I know, it's like, well, no, we're planning on burning this.
Yeah.
So no, they've got to have a change of thinking. It's kind of like with the Department of Ecology, when we were putting in for an air quality permit, they are not allowed to consider that this material we wanted to pyrolyze was going to be burned in an open burn for, a $50 permit. It's like, well, and, it cost us, it took months and about $2,000 in permitting fees to have them allow us to take this material that was literally in a burn pile and pyrolyze it. So, it's like,
Yeah. And
these guys, they don't adjust quickly.
Yeah, it was $50 in about 2 weeks to slather it with diesel fuel and to put it up in the air.
Yeah. Yep.
So
anyway, Forest Service, yeah, it's basically the end user that gets the credit for storing this carbon. So, essentially the farmer is the one who would eventually get paid for that. But along the way, that makes it more affordable for the farmer to use it. So it's good. It's all good.
yeah, and this is something I didn't cover and I should have, life cycle analysis. To participate in carbon crediting, you have to do a life cycle analysis end to end of your process, and it is exceptionally detailed. You have to account for the carbon embodied in the production of each piece of equipment. So this feller buncher weighs 78,000 pounds. How much carbon does it take to make that 78,000 pounds of steel? How much does it burn every hour it's running? How much is it, is accounted for your, for each one of those little trees you got, the transportation, all of the processes, every motor in your plant, all the way out to the end user. It is an incredibly detailed process.
But that's how carbon crediting works, is you got to make sure that there's the actual benefit. So, all the carbon that goes in the ground associated with biochar, all that is deducted. All the things that happened along the way to get it in the ground, those are all deducted. So that's proper carbon crediting.
Yeah.
So, but at least we're not using coal-fired plants to make the electricity that,
Yes.
So, but it's pretty interesting because now they are talking about carbon crediting for reducing fire risks, for reducing fire. And that is pretty amazing because boy, we'll be in tall cotton if that ever comes around. But that maybe is something that the Forest Service might be able to take advantage of that, and wouldn't that be lovely? So
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be a hard question, but if 80% of the biochar, like 80% of carbon is stored in biochar, right? With the scale of production that y'all are envisioning and the machinery the life cycle analysis of that machinery, how much carbon is emitted in that process? Does that make sense?
So what is the net?
Yeah.
Oh, God, it's been about 3 weeks or a month since we made the last run on that, and I am drawing a blank.
it would be, yeah, see, we haven't got that nailed down yet. I mean, it's tens of thousands of dollars to really go through this, and our
It has
plant,
to be a third party.
yeah,
independent
yeah,
third
we
party.
don't do it independently, but our plant design is not complete at this point where we know the exact equipment that's going to be used. We're getting it narrowed down, but that until that is fully identified, we can't complete the LCA. But if it's 50% of the total carbon that goes in the ground, I mean, that's what it is. So, I mean, electric vehicles are on the way. We could be, if we're using electric vehicles to transport this material, our aim is to make the best use of every single molecule. It's like the buffalo, it's like use it all. If there's none of it should be waste. That's how nature works, right? There's no waste. It all cycles, and we want to plug in and be part of the cycle. So we haven't found out yet.
So yeah, we're working on it. We will definitely be carbon positive. And as much as humanly possible. And on the electric vehicles, the trucks in particular, if you think about driving a truck unloaded into the forest uphill, putting 60,000 pounds on it and coming back down with regenerative braking. I've seen some interesting estimates on the cost savings on that, but it is significant.
Yeah.
She's worried I'm gonna geek out.
No, I'm not. No, I'm the one that thought of that.
Yeah, I
It's-
know.
It's capturing the potential energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to power equipment with yeah.
So we probably have time for one more question, and I saw another hand up.
I was just wondering what the biochar market looks like and who's buying biochar.
The biochar market, well, there are many markets for biochar. We are looking specifically at agriculture because we have the Columbia Basin right there. We have this monster. And that's where we have been seeking it. I hate to say this, I can't actually discuss the customers that were signing the letter of intent. That's kind of a sensitive thing for us, given that there's other guys coming into this market. There's a huge interest across agriculture right now. For instance, the Washington Wine Commission has biochar research as one of their 2022 priorities. You see the same thing through many of the different agricultural sectors. But there's also, on the west side, they're incredibly interested in using it for wastewater remediation. because you can design biochars to grab heavy metals out of wastewater streams, PCBs, pharmaceuticals. Carbon is so versatile, you can kind of tweak it to do a whole bunch of things. One that we've been kind of working with a chemical engineer on is making biochars that can capture nitrates and phosphates out of dairy effluent. And then you're just taking that fertilizer that they applied to the fields, the cows ate it, relinquished it, capturing it with biochar, and then you have a carbon dense fertilizer to go right back out on the field, cycling the fertilizers. It's those, having a single use for the biochar is one thing, having multiple value added streams to it, that's really where the benefits really add up.
Yeah, there's one guy that's using a specially designed biochar made from rice husks to capture like these rare metals from recycled electronics. And and then they use that biochar and they burn it off and make energy, and they've got the metals left behind. It's the number of different things you could design things for is virtually limitless. And I was opining a few weeks ago to our engineer that within 10 years AI is going to be designing biochars for specific molecules, chemicals. He says, oh no, that's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. But I see the potential for biochar as being like this filter between our modern lifestyle and the crap that we create that goes out into the environment. So much of that could be captured with biochar, and just keep, and then with the really, really nasty stuff that you don't want to then put that in the ground, it's a perfectly good additive for like asphalt, cement, things like that, where it's just going to just get locked up there for the long term.
Yeah.
So the possibilities are staggering.
Yeah.
But
and when you think about things like the PAH is going into all the Puget Sound rivers that are killing all the salmon, you can capture those. It's like, oh, we can fix a whole suite of problems, and we're really only limited by our imaginations.
But for home gardening use, just one thing, please. If you're going to get yourself some biochar, and we hope we'll make it available to you before too long, but it's great in the garden, but first run it through your compost, because that pre-charges it with all these nutrients, does great things for the compost, does great things for the biochar, and it's even better than putting compost and biochar in the soil. So it's my favorite thing.
Does it need to be done? Does it need to be charged on a commercial scale as well, or not?
They can, you don't have to, but it's a good thing to do because it's basically kind of hungry. It's got all that surface area and all those sites. So if you put raw biochar in the soil, it has the potential to reduce the nutrient levels in the soil temporarily, maybe that first growing season. So you can charge it. I mean, you can put it in with fertilizer or like manure teas. They're using it, the urine out of dairies and feedlots to charge biochar. So it's just a sponge for nutrients.
So on that note, I had no idea that I could get super excited over biochar.
Biochar dance.
Yeah, no idea whatsoever. And I think it's exciting related to not only forest health, climate change, but also economic development. So it kind of ticks a lot of boxes. And it's such a nice partnership with Winton Manufacturing, using a facility that has been sitting idle for many years. So super exciting. And I hope you will join me in thanking Tom and Gina for a really interesting presentation.
Thank you. All right. So I didn't bring a pad with me, but if I could get something for
We have a pen,
people
grab
can.
a piece of paper and a clipboard.